Hey, good afternoon. Thank you everybody for coming out. I'm Joe Shaw. I'm the executive editor of the Press News Group, which is the Southampton Press, the East Hampton Press, and 27east.com. And this is something that's a little bit unusual for us in a couple of ways. First of all, this is a conversation with, and for those of you who saw us try this for the first time in January, we did it for the special Southampton Town Board race. And we thought it went very well to do a discussion of issues with candidates without the debate format. So we thought we'd try it again this time, so we're still testing out the format a little bit here. It's also unusual for us because we generally do not get involved in primary races, but the Democratic primary race for the U.S. House in the 1st District this year has been particularly interesting and hard-fought battle, and we thought it might be beneficial to have an event like this. So, with that, I would like to introduce the two candidates, and actually what I'm going to do is let them introduce themselves. It's Anna Thrum-Holst and David Colon, and they come to us from slightly different backgrounds, and I'll let them tell you about that. Anna, you come to the race from nonprofits via a position in Southampton Town Government. Talk about that a little bit. What in your background prepares you for serving in the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, I think just what you said, a combination of a background in not-for-profit, a background of having served community, of having been a problem solver, both in the private and the public sector, and where I've devoted my career to working with and for people, to solve problems, to deal with issues around income inequality, access to education, access to social services, and where then when I was elected to the town board 8 years ago, to look at the issues that were confronting constituents in the town of Southampton. And when you look at the town of Southampton, you go to the Far East, where we have one of the highest, if not the highest valued zip code in the country. And then you go to the western end of town, where the Flanders Riverside district is the single most economically challenged district on Long Island. And looking at the problems of being able to afford to live here, being able to afford to pay your taxes, having access to services, having access to education, having jobs, economic development, economic opportunity, and looking at how you balance a town and municipal budget that's almost a $100 million operational budget, over $150 million capital budget, and the infrastructure issues that face the town, the taxation issues that face the town. As you know, when I was first elected, this town was soon downgraded by the rating agencies. We uncovered multi-million-dollar debt, commingling of funds, a financial house that was in a mess, and had to deal with all of that, and the environmental issues that face this town and this district, and the work that we absolutely had an impetus to get done. In my 6 years as town supervisor, we dealt with 5 named storms, and those are challenges that prepare you for working with the federal agencies that need to work for this district, the federal dollars and taxpayer dollars that need to be brought back to this district, and problem solving on both the financial and the social level for constituents of all walks of life.
Okay. Let me ask you real quick before I move to Mr. Colon. At what point in your background, when you were in nonprofit, is there something that sparked your interest in going into public service? Was there an incident? Was there some kind of something that sparked your interest in the first place?
Well, first of all, as most women, I was asked to go into public service in an elected office. It's a well-known fact that women don't generally, unlike most men, wake up at some point in their young lives and say, I see a senator in the mirror or a president or anything of that sort. And that's a pretty well-known fact that women generally have to be asked a multitude of times to even consider going into to public service and certainly elected office. And I think we should talk about that later because I think it's relevant to this race. But I was asked by Rich Schaefer, the chair of the Sub-County Democratic Party, to run for office because of the work that I had gotten done in my not-for-profit background in my education
That was to
background.
run for town board.
I was to run for town board.
Great. Mr. Clement, you are from Setauket, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're a businessman, venture capitalist, is that right?
Yep.
And you also have done public service. You were chair of the Suffolk County Planning Commission. I believe you were on the commission for several years.
Yeah, 8 years or so.
So introduce yourself to the voters of the district.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Joe, for having us. It's a great opportunity, and thank you all for being here, particularly on a beautiful day when you could be outside enjoying this wonderful day. I appreciate, I know both Anna and I appreciate you spending a little time here with us. My background, I grew up here in Eastern Long Island. I have my folks were met out here and raised me and my sister here. My mom was a public schools teacher. My dad was an engineer. And Long Island was a great place to grow up. Learned the value of hard work through my parents. Learned the value of our natural environment. I loved boating in the Peconic Bay and playing in the woods, etc. Also learned the values of the Democratic Party. I've been involved in the Democratic Party since I was 17 years old. Volunteered on my first campaign. And back when it wasn't always easy to be a Democrat around here, and it's still not easy in many places, but we know that we've come a long way than we were at in the 80s. So for me, my grandfather was an important person in my life, and he was someone who instilled in me the important values of the Democratic Party: opportunity, hope, fairness, and those are the values I've tried to live in my career and my life. And that's why I was so distraught when the Republicans well, first of all, when Lee Zeldin was elected as our member of Congress. He's been a leader of the Tea Party parade, and he's been a leader in Washington for values that I think are very different from those of us who are on the progressive side of things. For me, I got involved in public service early as helping on campaigns, supporting the Democratic Party. And then after going away to college and law school, I became a federal prosecutor. I was a prosecutor out of the Justice Department in Washington. I represented our country around the world, dealing with foreign governments and protecting Americans and fighting back against corporate fraud. And after 9/11, was involved in terrorism prosecution. So I've been involved in public service since my first working days. I then later was a state prosecutor, held accountable hospital systems that were bilking patients and taxpayers, and recovered for the taxpayers in New York the largest ever recovery that we'd ever received, which was $70 million in a healthcare fraud settlement. Went to private practice for a little while, and then after that, was asked to get involved in an entity that was starting and growing companies. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years in the private sector as my day job, is starting companies and building them, including some here on Long Island I've been involved in, and many around the country. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. For me, I got most involved in issues in Eastern Suffolk County as chair of the Planning Commission for our county for the last 8 years. I was involved in making sure we protect our open space, protect our waters, invest in renewable energy, and those are all values that have been very important to me, and I'm proud to work throughout this entire district on those issues. And so for me, that was having both federal experience, but also local experience in terms of the issues that affect quality of life, is what made me think about running, combined with the fact that we had a Tea Party zealot in Lee Zeldin who does not represent our interests or our values here in Eastern Suffolk County.
We had a lot to work with. Melissa, you know what? You actually allow me to say perfectly into the first question, which is, I think, one of the things, you two have had a couple of events where you've had debates on the East End, but I think the party has sponsored all of those, and today I really want to talk about some of the things that separate the two of you for Democratic voters. I think to some degree we can talk a great deal about the Democratic Party's position in Lee Zeldin, and I think we certainly should do that. But I really want to focus on some differences between the two of you. So my first question is, for us on the East End, a big issue is always the environment. So which one of you is the greater environmentalist? I think you both say you have very strong environmentalist backgrounds. So let me hear you both make the case. I'm going to give you first crack at this.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Well, The bottom line is that our environment is critically important. Our first responsibility as any elected official as well as citizens of this area is to preserve, protect, and defend our natural environment. I've been proud to have been done that throughout my career. I've focused on particularly on renewable energy. I've been a leader on that. My work on renewable energy for incentivizing solar and making it easier to put solar around around Suffolk County has not only been recognized here in Suffolk County, but it's been recognized nationally as a leading effort to incentivize renewable energy. And it's now become the system that's actually used, the process that's used throughout New York State. So I've been a leader in local as well as regional and national efforts on renewable energy. I've been a leader in open space preservation. I helped preserve in particular the 555 property out in Amagansett. And I think that is obviously a critical parcel in East Hampton that I was intimately involved in saving. And also our water quality was something that was particularly, that I focused on putting together the county master plan and making sure that our water quality, which is of utmost importance to all of us, was protected. And it's because of that work, compared with Anna's record, that the Long Island Environmental Voters Forum has endorsed me in this race. I think that's also an important reason why all the East Hampton Town Democratic elected officials have endorsed me in this race. And I think it's also an important reason why the Southampton Town Democratic elected officials who served with Anna on the town board here in Southampton have all endorsed me. I'm proud of my record. Anna's record's a different one. It involves overdevelopment, it involves allowing sand mining in the Pine Barrens, and it involves, quite frankly, not living up to the progressive values I think we as Democrats care about.
Yes.
I answer it with the truth and the real facts. Let's see, where do we start? So when I was first elected 8 years ago, I put in place the first sustainability advisory committee that the town of Southampton had ever had before. I was the only non-Republican to serve on the Southampton Town Board. And in my 8 years of serving on the town board, I served for 6 out of those in minority. So the upward battle of trying to get things of progressive natures done when you're in a minority, I think first of all speaks to the kind of work that one can expect to have to do and the kind of struggle you have to expect to kind of deal with once you get to Washington. But I managed to get the Sustainability Committee established with some great volunteers, some of which I see here tonight, who have done fantastic work for us and who led the way in getting Southampton to being one of the most progressive towns in terms of environmental policy. And let me give you some details on that. So the first thing we did was present sustainable building codes that were groundbreaking sustainable building codes, which meant that the bigger you built, the more sustainable you had to build your house. Got enormous pushback, but brought together the building community, the development community, the real estate community, what I would call the stakeholders and the pushbacks in this. And I got them all to see why this made sense. And in the end, we got the votes, we got it adopted. It was cutting edge policy and has since been emulated in other municipalities. Then I looked at how we preserve open space out here. We're fortunate enough to have the Community Preservation Fund that supports us. But I looked at that and I looked at the fact that in the past, the town board waited for landowners to come to it and say, I might want to work with you on preserving some land. So I put together a group of environmentalists, land use experts, and we went about creating what we called our wish list. And we created a map of the entire town and looked at what were the remaining open spaces, including threatened wetlands, historic sites, and any land that had environmental significance. And we created a list of what were the ones that we absolutely, without question, had to work to preserve. So we created an absolute critical list, and a second tier list, and a third tier list. It was a total of over 2,000 acres. And I'm proud to tell you that in my time, we then went actively out. We sent letters, we called, we ramped up our CPF fund, and made sure that we preserved those properties. In my time at Town Hall, we preserved 4,000 acres or more. We focused on the threatened wetlands. After Hurricane Sandy, one of the things we learned was that the degradation of our wetlands as a result of nitrogen loading was part of the reason we dealt with the surge the way we did, and properties were impacted the way they were. Because wetlands and eelgrass have acted traditionally as a sponge, really. And because they've been so degraded, it became even more important for us to start preserving and restoring those. Then we went on to look at renewable energy and how we work to get off the LIPA grid to the best of our ability. We are saddled by some of the highest utility rates in this country, and our dependence on fossil fuel had to stop. So we set about Solarize Southampton, which created an incentive program that made it so that in the aggregate, neighborhoods can go together, tap into a solar program, and we are now the single most solarized town. So, and there I've got to say, unlike my opponent, who was a LIPA trustee for several years, voted for consecutive rate increases, did not start to work against what our governor is working against, which is the committed contracting that we are bound by through LIPA, which means that any utility provider, be it through infrastructure, we cannot negotiate those rates with them. I got to keep going, because there's more.
Actually, what I want to do is, let me stop, because I want to give you both a chance to counterpunch here on a couple of issues. I'm going to let you go first. Mr. Cologne raised a couple of interesting points. The one is that the environmental forum has endorsed him over you. How much weight should voters give that? And the second thing is, there are a lot of elected officials on the East End, including some of your former colleagues on the town board, who have endorsed Mr. Cologne. What should voters think of that as well? Now's a chance to talk.
Well, I think voters should look, first of all, at what the Environmental Voters Forum is, and that is a group that is, in fact, sponsored, and I guess sees a lot of its revenue come from Caithness, which is, again, you harken that back to LIPA, that is who built the Caithness plant, dirty fossil fuel burning plant that we are all dependent on here. And I think you look at the Clean Water Center that I conceived of with Jen Garvey, my brilliant Jen Garvey, who is here, who's now the director of it, my chief of staff, and we looked at the crisis on Long Island, the #1 environmental crisis on Long Island today, which is the nitrogen polluting that is going into our bays, into our groundwaters and our surface waters. And by all accounts, scientists have looked at this and said this is the #1 environmental threat that we have. So it wasn't good enough for me to just sit and say, this is a problem. What had to be the next step was, what are we doing about it? And so we conceived of the Clean Water Technology Center, which is now a reality at Stony Brook. It is creating jobs every day. It is cracking the nut on the technology that will retrofit 360,000 homes in Suffolk County today that are dependent on single and separate septic systems, and that are 70–80% of that nitrogen loading. Who have I been endorsed by? I've been endorsed by former Congressman Tim Bishop, a great environmentalist. I've been endorsed by Assemblyman Fred Thiel, a great environmentalist. I've been endorsed by Kirsten Gillibrand, a great environmentalist and our senator. I've been endorsed by many of the city members of Congress because of my track records. I've been endorsed by Jay Schneiderman. I've been endorsed by Bill Lindsay. I've been endorsed by several great environmentalists.
Fair enough. Okay. Mr. Clerk. I'd ask you to hold the applause. Mr. Klein, let's talk about LIPA. I want to get back to clean water in a minute too.
Sure.
But it's a fair point. LIPA has not, and its subsidiaries afterwards, haven't really been the biggest proponents of solar in Suffolk County.
Yeah, I mean, when I was approached about 7 years ago about joining the LIPA board as a volunteer, the biggest reason I decided to do it was because LIPA was not doing a good job when it came to fighting for progressive values like renewable energy. So I saw that as an opportunity, despite all the problems that LIPA has, all the baggage that it has in terms of the old tax rates, old debt from the Shore Nuclear Power Plant, all those things, to actually go there and actually be an advocate for renewable energy because they didn't have anyone doing that. And so I focused on that, and actually, we now have not only the incentives in place that allow everyone, to put solar in around Suffolk County and Long Island, but also I fought for and got LIPA to commit to the largest renewable energy RFP, it's a request for proposal, for large renewable projects in Long Island's history. And so all the major renewables that are going forward are a result of the effort to go and fight inside LIPA for that renewable energy policy. So I'm proud about that. I worked hard on that, made that my focus, despite obviously a lot of other things that LIPA has baggage from the past, and I think that we need to make sure that it continues in the future. I mean, bottom line is renewable energy is critically important as we fight climate change. Climate change is, I believe, the most pressing issue we face as a society. We here on Long Island are on the front lines of that, here stuck out into the ocean as we are, and it really is a national security issue as well. We are seeing more and more of our time and tax dollars going to areas where climate change is increasing the global threat. And so climate change is something that we all need to do our share of. LIPA was not doing its share of. Through my volunteer efforts on that board, we worked to make sure that LIPA steps up, and we now have the largest renewable plants here in Long Island that we've ever had before.
Let's go back to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's an important point to be made there too. I think you need to talk about why you were there, where you also led the effort for the second Caithness plant, the Caithness 2 plant, which was based on an effort that your group and a calculation that you made that we were not energy sufficient through the existing dirty plants that are supplying us here, and then RFP'd and awarded a contract for Caithness 2, which then the state commission came down, looked at